This is our first video for the beginning of Eureka Math. I'm starting by just kind of showing you a template so you can kind of see the features of it. Right up here we have 5.1, that means 5th grade, Module 1. This module happens to be called the Story of Units because this entire 5th grade aspect of math is looking at the story of units, what happens to them mathematically as far as our concepts. We're beginning with Lesson 1. What you're looking at here is Template 2. This is part of your homework packet that just went home today. Here's one that I've got that is whiteboard marker. Here's the one that went home with you today. For either you to use, reference, or if the ones that are provided are good enough, go for that. This one we've got some word problems. Maybe that's where you'll like to use this. I am starting today with our instruction on a kind of more simple level, however. This is one that I've made, and it is kind of messy because it's also 2 whiteboard pen. I used it 3 times last night when I started to try and do a video and kind of lost the video. It disappeared on my computer, so I'm trying again. I also used it when I was in class today doing some instruction. I also, too, brought with me props to be able to kind of demonstrate with the use of money so that hopefully this can be fairly clear to my students. We're looking at tens, ones, the decimal place that divides between things that are whole and things that are not whole. They are partial. And so over there what we've got is hundredths and tenths. This right here is a penny. It is 1/100th of one whole dollar. If we happen to have 10 of these hundredths, we would have in this place value space then 10. But we can only put in this place value space digits, numbers, symbols that are single digit. So we could have either 0 or nothing there, all the way through 9. Once we get to 10 of those, however, then this needs to change to a symbol that is in a different place value. It then goes to 1 of another type. Now it is tenths. So it takes, when you look at hundredths, it takes 100 of those to have a whole. These penny rollers right here hold 100 pennies. So if you have 100 hundredths, you therefore have one whole. Now looking at tenths. If we have 10 tenths, so if you have 10 tenths, you have a whole. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. We now have 10 tenths. So I can take these, move them, and I now know I have a whole. I've got one whole dollar. And if we were to keep going with that and put 9 more of them, we would then have 2 digits here. We'd have a 1 and a 0 because we'd have 10 ones. But what happens if we say up here, this math problem, if we say 1 times 10, here's 1 times 10, we get 10. So these just become this. So now 1 times 10 is 10. It didn't move the decimal when we went from 10 dimes to one whole dollar. The decimal didn't actually move. It actually just gained a place value because we overloaded this place value, and so it moved up to being one of these. One thing that I talked in my class about today that referenced something we talked about with the history of money. When you had cavemen and they were trying to explain to the others how much of a type of food they had found, generally that went between 1 and 20. So they were able to just signal with hand movements or showing on the fingers how many. And so they didn't move the decimal. If they went from finding, if each of 10 people each found 3 apple trees, for example, it didn't move the decimal. It actually went 10 times 3. And so it increased the place value as opposed to moving the decimal. like my generation was taught is happening. So with this, kind of getting back to this idea of if you have one of something, and then you say times 10 of them, you get 10 of them. But thinking about place value, we can take this to the next level and say, well, what if we have one of the item, but we actually have 100 people and they each have one of those items? How many of those items do we then have? Well, we have 100 of them then. So if you're going 1 times 100, what that's going to look like on our place value charts with math is it's going to transfer over 2 place values. And you'll have a 1 in the 100th place. Now if we think about it in terms of pennies, and so for example, if we have 1/100th, if we have 1/100th times 100, and we move 2 place values. So if we start here with 1/100th, and we gain 2 place values, we've gained 1, we've gained 2. And so if it's hundredths, and you have 100 of them, all of a sudden you have a whole unit. If you have a tenth, if you have 1 dime, wait a second, let's say you have 100 of them. So let's see what that looks like. That in this case is 1/10. Here's your decimal, here's your decimal, 1/10. Here's 1 in the 10th place. And if we say times 100, we're going to move 1 place value, 2 place values, and our tenth, if you multiply by 100, moves 2 place values, and it actually becomes 10 whole. So now part of tonight's homework is actually going the other direction. Something that we've talked about in class is that if you are multiplying by 10, you're actually adding repeatedly. So you'd be adding it 10 times over. Now, if you're going to think about it, the opposite of multiply is divide. So if we were going to divide by 10, the place value is going to go the other direction. So if we divided, for example, this whole by a tenth. So we have 1 whole, we're dividing it by a tenth, so we've got 1 in the 10th place. What's going to happen is it's going to go the other direction. So we're starting with 1 here in the 1's place. We're going to lose a place value. And so then, in that case, if we go from being 1 whole, we know that that's actually going to be 10 of these. 10 tenths. 10 tenths. So it's going to be 10 dimes. So if we divide it by a tenth, oh, sorry, it's actually just going to be 1/10. What is a tenth of a dollar? It is a tenth of a dollar. So there's my mistake. So thinking about it in that direction, instead of just moving 1 place value in the positive direction if you're multiplying, you're moving 1 place value in the negative direction, in the opposite direction. Now if you did it the other way, and we actually went, instead of 10, and we said we have a whole, and we're going to divide by hundredths, we have no tens, we're just dividing by hundredths, we know then 1/100th of a dollar is a penny. So it's going to move 2 place values. So it's decreased by 2 value places. If we were multiplying, it would have gone the other direction. So that kind of covers for tonight's homework the first 2 pages. This one right here, it's asking you at the end to really think about what's happening to the 5. You have 3 and 452 thousandths, 3 and 452 thousandths, 3 and 452 thousandths, but you're multiplying by 10 or 100 or by 1,000. This one, it's 345, 345, 345. Multiply by 10, multiply by 100, multiply by 1,000. It's asking what happens to the value of 4. in the change in all of those. The first page is asking what happens to the value of 5 in all 3 of these. From there are word problems, 3, 4, and 5. Those are tonight's homework. I hope that helps.